Hello and welcome back to the podcast. For those of you who are new around here, my name is Ruth and I started this podcast to amplify the voices of women in leadership and to talk about what we do beyond the school gate, the good, the bad and the funny. Different setup today. I hope you guys like it. The sun is shining, so I hope the light is looking okay. But we're going to jump straight on in it. This is a topic that actually a couple of people have asked me to talk about, and I've heard a lot online about this specific topic and read a lot. And from what I can put together, I think there's two really distinctive camps when it comes to this topic, and it's the topic of menopause slash perimenopause slash reasonable adjustments within the workplace. So there's a lot online at the moment, and I think the algorithms are definitely picking up on specific topics at the moment, like it usually does. And I think there's two really key camps when it comes to menopause and reasonable adjustments within the workplace. I suppose one perspective is that we should be kind and considerate and compassionate to all employees, because that's how essentially you get the best out of people, right? Is if you treat them well and you're kind and you're fair and you treat them with compassion, then for the most part people are going to go above and beyond their day-to-day responsibilities. So there's an argument. I think that's one camp, and then along the other line of the spectrum, I suppose there's another camp which is around this is why women have a glass ceiling. This is why men are chosen over women for specific roles and specific promotion opportunities, and that this requests like this contribute to the gender pay gap. So there's two camps that I'm seeing a lot, and look, there's people that are along the line of the spectrum, but from what I can see, there's two really clear distinctive camps, and I just think it's really interesting. I think becoming a woman of a certain age, I'm definitely reading up and learning a lot more about menopause and perimenopause, and from a real-time, real-life slash perspective, as opposed to a hypothetical thing that you're kind of maybe taught at school and maybe not taught at school in some cases. And I just wanted to come on to talk about this as a concept and about the two distinct camps, because I just think it's really, really interesting. I think that just reasonable adjustments within the workplace overall, if you was to take it away from menopause, I think is the right thing to do. I think is reasonable and I think is fair. I think that it's a fine line to walk, because I always think that you have to balance it with the business need and what's fair and equitable, not equal, equitable across the board. And I also think we're working in a different time now, right? We're working pre-pandemic, where the workplace and things look different for us as a culture, as people within the workplace. So I think there are already adjustments that are being made pre-pandemic that post-pandemic that weren't made before the pandemic, if that makes sense. And we're just working in a different way in general. So I suppose one of the questions I would have around this topic is, well, why would you not make a reasonable adjustment for somebody who is experiencing menopause, perimenopause? It's a time in your life that for some people can be a really big window. So I suppose my initial thought goes to, well, why would you not? And if it doesn't conflict with business needs and the person's ability to be able to do their job, why would you not make reasonable adjustments? So for example, I know it's different but similar. When I was pregnant with my son, it was because towards the end, it was really hard to continue to concentrate towards the end of the day. So like the last maybe hour, 2 hours. But I found that if I had a nap in the middle of the day, I was just able to rest in the middle of the day. I was able to do the full day. So where I was working at the time were happy to make reasonable adjustments, but we came to this negotiation, which I think, because I was on the receiving end, I think it was fair. I still did my hours, but instead of having a half an hour lunch break, I had an hour lunch break. We had a first aid room that I could just go and put my head down for half an hour. For the most part, didn't sleep. I just laid there in silence for half an hour, and then went and got some food and came back. But the extra half an hour I was given at lunchtime, I made up at the end of the day, so I stayed back half an hour extra at the end of the day. So if you totaled up my hours worked that day, it was the same as to whether I took half an hour or an hour lunch. That for me feels like a reasonable adjustment. The organisation is not paying me for hours that I'm not working. It's actually getting more out of me, because I could have ploughed through, took half an hour lunch, ploughed through, but my productivity in those last 2 hours would have been really low, just because I'm just going a bit slower, right? So I think that that's a reasonable adjustment, and I was being fair, they were being fair. I don't think that disadvantaged anybody. I think it meant it was a good outcome for everybody. So I think if it's a situation like that, well, why would we not make those type of reasonable adjustments if it helps somebody? And I don't think this is exclusive for women experiencing menopause or at that time in their life. I think it can be for any reasonable adjustment within the workplace. I think I always try and go into things with kindness. Well, why would we not? We are human beings, we are not robots. Why would we not? Question mark. And it would be that type of discussion. And I understand this is coming from a privileged place of where I work, and the environment in which I work allows for those reasonable adjustments. And there might be some workplaces that just don't allow for that. But I always think with kindness, compassion, open communication, and being curious collectively around, well, how could this work? What could this look like? Let's think outside the box. I think that more arrangements can be made as opposed to like a blanket no to reasonable adjustments. In regards to this is why women have glass ceilings, I think that's a whole and the gender pay gap, I think that's a whole podcast in itself, and I don't kind of want to go into it in this one, but I just think that there are two distinctive camps, and I just think it's really interesting that people are really behind the camp that they're in. And from what I've seen and podcasts I've listened to and what I've seen online, I don't think that split is is like a gender related thing or any other in like intersectionality. I don't think it's like a specific cohort of people think this and a specific cohort of people think that. Overall, I just think it's different views and different opinions. I also think that it's encouraging more conversation around menopause, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's in the home. I think that's really important. I was born in the 80s, so my education in this space was massively around safe sex and basically don't get pregnant, and clearly I was pregnant at 17, so you know I failed that class. But we didn't really get taught about menopause. It was this thing, it was the change that happened and you'll get a hot flush and your period would stop. That was the long and the short of kind of what we were taught. And I think that I'm seeing there's a lot more conversation about menopause now and perimenopause and what it means and the symptoms, and actually it was always thought to be related to a specific part of your body as opposed to hormones. So even if you look at where you would, the profession within the medical space as to where you would go for support with perimenopause or where you may go to a specialist, if you look at even where the medical structure / system puts that, I have a huge question mark about, is that the right place? Because you're putting it there because you're thinking it's about a specific part of my body as opposed to hormonal changes, if that makes sense. So I even think there's a lot to be done around the education around menopause. A lot of doctors online are talking about how it's such a small part of their training, which I think is just wild, because over 50% of us will go through it, and a lot bigger percentage will have experience of it. You may have a mum or a sister or anybody in your family whose periods are basically finishing and they're going to experience menopause, or they may go into early menopause or whatever. So for the most part, you're either going to be directly impacted by it, or you'll know somebody that is in your personal life or in your work life. So I think it's important that we all have a really good understanding of what it is and what it isn't. I think a lot of people do think it's the hot flushes, and I think there's more narrative now around some of the mental health element, mental health / depression / hormonal changes. I think there's a lot more discussion about the different types of symptoms that come along with perimenopause. So yeah, comment down below. I'd be really interested in what you guys think in regards to, should reasonable adjustments be made within the workplace for those experiencing menopause? Comment down below. I'd be really keen to hear people's views, and I'm really keen to see if the comments on this podcast are as polar opposite as what I've been seeing online and being fed by the algorithm. I'm keen to see if this community is kind of that separated in kind of what we're thinking as well. So yeah, I'm going to leave it here, but thank you so much for either watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify. Your support and engagement really means a lot to me, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye.